Sifter for the ear.
News, interviews, reviews, cinema, TV, streaming. Action.
Hi, y'all. This is Jerry Williams, a.k.a. TV Jerry. Modern Richmond has been around for over a decade, featuring contemporary spaces. Their next event is October 23rd at Tilt Creative and Production Studio, a longtime video production company's facility, ironically, next door to Movieland. I'll include a link to Modern Richmond on the webpage for the show at tvjerry.com.
Ridley just walked out of the studio into the control room and pulled out a cigar out of his pocket and said, I guess we'll go have a smoke now. And we were all sitting out in the back alley out here smoking cigars with Ridley Scott.
That was Paul Bruski talking about working with director Ridley Scott when there was a power outage in the studio. Paul is chief engineer at In Your Ear Studios, Richmond's premier sound facility. He'll be joined by president and co-founder Carlos Chafin, who's been on the show as a surprise drop-in several times. They'll talk about working with some of the stars who've been in town and explain ADR, Foley, and other tricks of the trade.
Sifter Review of the Week.
Fight Night, the $1 Million Heist on Peacock. In 1970, Muhammad Ali won a fight in Atlanta, and there was a celebration house party that ended up getting robbed. The fact that major gangsters were there increased the pressure to find the culprits. This cast is loaded with top actors having a great time channeling the larger-than-life 70s versions of their characters. This includes Kevin Hart, a serious role, Taraji P. Henson, his sleazy friend, Samuel L. Jackson, the crime boss, Don Cheadle, the first black cop in Atlanta, and Terrence Howard, in a great wig. The series starts slowly, but once things get going, there's lots to enjoy. The blaxploitation-style period performances are accompanied by appropriate music, great clothes, split-screen editing, and cinematography to match. There are splashes of comedy, violence, and racism. Like miniseries, this could have been shorter than 8 hours, but every episode gets more compelling and fun. My review only covers 6 of them, but I can't wait to see how it ends. By the way, it's based on a true story. I gave Fight Night, the $1 Million Heist 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm thrilled to have two of my longtime friends and colleagues, Mr. Carlos Chafin and Paul Bruski, here today. Paul, for the first time, Carlos has been, 2 or 3 times you've been dropped in, but you haven't been featured yet. So this is an exciting day for us, isn't it?
Yeah, I've grown up.
Yeah. You're a big boy now. So
I've been elevated.
There you go. So first of all, I know both of you started way back, I remember the days at Alpha Audio. Why don't you give us a quick history of how Alpha Audio turned into In Your Ear and what In Your Ear is?
Have you ever heard of Alpha Audio? I've never heard of Alpha Audio.
That's going back, Jerry.
That's going way back, I know.
Yeah,
most people listening to this probably, they weren't even born yet.
Yeah, they don't even remember Pleasance Hardware.
Yeah.
Which was where it was across the street from on Broad Street.
Or Fifth Avenue, the restaurant.
Yeah, which is where I met my wife.
Really
I
cool.
was drinking the mistakes at the end of the bar. She was the bartender. So during the early 70s, there was this growth of independent studios. And Alpha Audio was one of those early independent studios, and it just happened to be in Richmond, Virginia. I showed up as a kid playing on sessions. I was at VCU at the time. Years went by. I migrated through all these various positions, learning how to do engineering and repairing stuff and doing all sorts of things. And we kept growing. I mean, at one time, Alpha Audio, I think, had pretty close to 20-something employees. And this guy comes blowing in from the Midwest, some guy named Paul Bruski. He's wearing a suit and everything.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I wore a suit to the interview.
I'm like, dude, why are you wearing a suit? But
and that's the last interview I've ever had.
Wayne Pooley was also an engineer that blew in shortly after that.
He's Bruce Hornsby's engineer.
Yeah, he's
right.
a
Dear friend of ours.
well-known guy at this point. That he's done quite well for himself in a career. But he and Paul showed up, and their first significant session was Guar.
Footnote.
In case you're new to the area, Guar is a heavy metal shock rock band based in Richmond since 1984. That's an initiation, isn't it? That's an orientation.
Yeah, it was. It was quite the initiation to Richmond too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So did y'all started doing some work for film, ADR, and voice and stuff still at Alpha, didn't you? That didn't just start at IY.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tricky history, but not that long ago in the 80s, the film business, the television business, and the audio business were separate industries.
Right.
And they didn't really talk to each other very much. We saw this as a tremendous opportunity. We thought, hey, man, the film guys and the video guys make a lot more money than we do as audio guys. We got to get in on this. And we actually invented a computer-driven system to link high-quality audio tape machines, 24-track recorders, with film and video equipment, which, to make a long story longer, eventually became the go-to setup for Disney. There's probably about 25 places that bought our setup.
Videotape machines and audio tape machines that all had to be synchronized. And that's what this product did.
Surprise guest drop in.
Now, I want to ask you about some of the people who've actually come in and done work. But before I do, somebody who's been there and done work with you wanted to drop in and say hello and talk about their experiences.
BK! Hey, what are you doing, man?
Hey guys, how are you?
Footnote.
BK Fulton is CEO of Sold to Fly Productions that specializes in film, stage, and books. I'll include a link to my podcast with BK on the webpage for the show at tvjerry.com. So BK, I think you've had a little experience with these guys down at In Your Ear, haven't you?
I absolutely have. I remember one time, one of my first films, Love.com, we were having some trouble with the distributor and they were coming back with all these red marks and it was a limited budget. I mean, basically we spent our money. And so I tell the folk at In Your Ear, I'm like, Carlos, man, I don't know what you got to do, but you got to turn them reds to yellow.
The green.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose a whole lot of money. And they got it done. So as far as
Can't
I'm
have
concerned,
BK losing a lot of money. That's not going to work.
So as far as I'm concerned, they're solid gold with me. I mean, the film was a success. We got it done. And I'm looking forward to doing many more projects with these wonderful people.
What did y'all have to do to fix it?
Oh, bribe some guys out in the alley. It wouldn't. Now, what it was is, like BK said, a lot of independent films. In this case, there was a very intimate conversation across a counter. And there was a refrigerator system right under where the two actors were talking.
Oh, okay.
It was kicking in, all that good stuff.
And no budget for ADR.
We had to negotiate with the ice cream machine or whatever this thing was, a refrigerator, and get it out of that conversation. Now, luckily, there's some great tools today that can save you from this kind of stuff. Actually, to get it through QC, I had to add some of the noise back into it to kind of smooth it.
So now I guess you've learned your lesson, BK. Let's check that audio better before you finish, right?
You got that right.
Well, I want to thank you for dropping in, BK, and obviously you'll be seeing those guys again soon, too, I'm sure.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thanks, BK.
All right,
Thank
man.
you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
You guys too. Bye-bye.
I do want to mention one thing, by the way, and you talk about spurious sound getting into shots. I'm sure you remember, Carlos, when you so graciously worked on my Dirt Woman documentary to clean up that sound. There was one particular sound bite, and I can't remember what it was now, but there was some horrible noise in the background, and y'all managed to clean that out. So, yes, it can be done. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the film stuff a little bit and talk about that. What do you remember was the first time you had an experience with somebody coming in the studio? Before that, let me do this. Why don't you explain to people, Paul, you used the word earlier, what is ADR?
Okay, ADR stands for automatic dialogue replacement. When you have problems with the location sound, the dialogue has to be redubbed in. Now, it always isn't just because the location sound is bad. There can be other reasons for doing ADR as well. Sometimes I've done several instances of ADR where they needed to do ADR to change or to tell the story better. A lot of times they'll use like a shot of the back of somebody's head and then we'll put in dialogue there to kind of help tell the story.
There's usually some background sound anyway, some noise, some street traffic or crickets or whatever. So you got to work that back in and blend it so it sounds perfect, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that done nowadays, especially on these big movies and everything that have, huge budgets and stuff. It's not a problem at all for them to send the actors back in and do ADR. And you were talking about one of the first sessions that we did a film with Sissy Spacek. And of course, Sissy Spacek lives here in Virginia.
Right.
And since then, we've worked with her many times. She always likes to come back here and do her ADR here.
Oh, yeah. One point of interest, Jerry, is the amount of stuff we have to do with the major film studios to assure secrecy. Not only, a non-disclosure agreement, but also just how we're going to handle the assets, the recordings, and all of that kind of stuff. Was it Fox made us put in a camera system in our vaults so that they could watch the hard drives?
Wow.
Yeah, we had to lock up the drives every day that we worked on them. And then we had to put a security camera where the drives were locked up.
So I know there's been, you mentioned Sissy Spacek, of course, Sir Anthony Hopkins, Ridley Scott, Claire Danes, D'Angelo, Mandy Patinkin, all kind of people have been in there.
Yeah.
Mike Henry, the great local Mike Henry, who I guess was in there.
Footnote.
Mike Henry is a Richmond-based actor who's best known as the voice of Cleveland on The Family Guy.
We've done about 14, 16 seasons of Family Guy here.
Wow, so he does all his voiceover pretty much in Richmond usually.
Over the years it's changed, but for a great number of years, he was camped out here.
We had to tune Paul's studio to match the Fox stage, that they used for that.
Ah, right.
So that when they intercut between him and actors in California and elsewhere, it all had the same acoustic quality to it. A lot of other people that have been in town for extended stays while they worked on movies shot in Virginia and all the other projects that they're working on, which very often actors are working on a multitude of things.
Sure.
They have to come in here to deal with those other things because they're stuck here. Not stuck, but
I was going to say, let's rephrase that, Carla.
Yeah. Sorry, Rita. While they're here visiting and bringing in all that commerce because they're doing the movie here, and enjoying the wonderful...
and loving
That's the word.
Being here in Virginia.
Yeah, exactly.
While all that's going on, they get to work on other projects for other clients.
Yeah. So I mentioned a bunch of those names. What are some of the interesting stories behind some of them? Maybe something that was really cool or something that went wrong or... somebody who was a particular a-hole, or of course you can't tell me who that would be.
There's a million of those, and they probably shouldn't be told, but I'd like to ask Paul to tell one. When Claire Danes was doing Homeland.
Yeah, there was one session that we were working on that and it was obvious that she was not feeling good. And I had the producer on the other end, because when we do these sessions all the time, we have to lock up with another stage in California or New York or wherever.
And by stage, you mean sound stage, just for the clarification.
Yes.
Or studio, right.
When we're doing it here, they're watching exactly what we're doing here, there in California.
Right.
She announced to the producer, that she was pregnant at that time.
Oh, right on the session.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to augment the story, the scene was a redo of a very intimate kind of scene, and she just came in, and when she saw what she had to do,
the producer just said, okay, 2 takes is enough. We got it.
Wow. He didn't want to deal anymore, huh? He was done.
Yeah. Nobody wanted to go there again.
What was also funny about this is she was also making the rounds to be on, all the talk shows to basically talk about the new season of Homeland. She was promoting it. She was on Jimmy Fallon. Yeah. The next night, right after the session, and they went into this long dialogue in her thing. He was asking her about all this stuff, and she went into this whole story about the dialogue session with Paul.
Oh wow!
On Fallon, we were laughing. We thought it was hilarious.
That's great. I know Sir Anthony Hopkins. He's a pretty cool guy. How was he to work with?
He was a true gentleman.
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony did 2 movies back to back here in Richmond.
Footnote.
Hopkins did Hannibal and Hearts of Atlantis in Richmond in the late 90s. Hannibal was directed by Ridley Scott.
While Ridley was here doing Hannibal, they called us to do the director's commentary for the DVD release of Gladiator. So Ridley came in to do that. They sent 2 big, huge beta tapes, and it had, the first half of the movie, and then the other tape had the second half of the movie. When we just finished the first hour of the movie, when we stopped to change tapes, It wasn't 2 seconds after I hit stop and hit save that the power went out in the whole,
wow.
it just went completely black in the studios and stuff. And thank God I hit save,
Yeah,
And,
really. Yeah.
Ridley just walked out of the studio into the control room and pulled out a cigar out of his pocket and said, I guess we'll go have a smoke now. And we were all sitting out in the back alley out here smoking cigars with Ridley Scott.
Wow. When Ridley or anybody is doing a commentary like that, you said you just roll. Do you actually just roll and they just talk, or do you stop and say, wait, let's do a take two on that particular comment, or you just let them just go?
I think they were such pros that they just, we let it roll. I think it was all one take.
Oh, wow. Okay. Earlier you mentioned ADR, and I know another thing that y'all get to do sometimes is Foley. Why don't you explain for the audience what Foley is and what kind of Foley work you've done?
Foley, of course, goes back to the old days of film. And all you'd get is this movie with dialogue. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't believable. It was clunky and it was awkward.
So here comes Jack Foley.
Yep. He comes in. They hired a guy from the radio world, the guys those guys that would do the radio shows where they'd have actors in, they read a script, and you got some guy playing coconuts for horses.
Yeah, the classic,
rattling cans and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So Jack Foley was one of those guys. They hired him to come in and fix this stuff. He had all the gadgets and tools and everything else. And that whole world of taking ordinary devices and sometimes some not ordinary devices and making cool sounds for movies to augment the experience, that all is given the name Foley. And one of the things that's associated with Foley is something called a Foley pit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of studios have these. We have them in 2 of our studios, and they are basically exactly that. It's a pit that lives in the middle of the studio. It goes directly to earth. There is no floor under it because you need the sound and the resonance of actually being able to walk and perform certain motions on terra firma. If you don't do it right on dirt, it sounds like dirt in a box.
Huh. You mentioned it's dirt. So obviously a lot of times in a movie when people are talking, you hear that as they're walking through the dirt or walking through the leaves or whatever. That's Foley. What are some examples of some of the more interesting Foley effects you had to create that weren't electronic? Because I know a lot of times there's plenty of sound effects. You can just touch a button, but sometimes you'll see something like maybe it's just like think of a coffee cup or some little sound effect that you have to create from scratch.
Well, yeah, in stuff like that, like what you're talking about, like a coffee cup being set down or stuff like that. What people don't realize too is that we have to do a lot of ADR and also what is called an M&E mix. And that's music and effects mix for foreign language distribution.
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all the voices are going to be replaced.
If you've got a movie that's going to be dubbed in Italian, you have to strip out all the dialogue and create a separate music and effects tracks for the people over in Italy when they dub it in. Say there's a scene and the guy is talking and he sets down his coffee cup while he's talking.
That sounds gone.
That sounds gone when you strip out all the dialogue.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then you got to replace that. So that's another thing we've done. We did a whole series for Showtime where we had to do an M&E mix for the entire season. That was
hard work.
It was very tedious because you have to sit there and watch. If somebody's got a bracelet on and they're talking and you hear the bracelet or something moving while they're talking, all that stuff has to be put back in.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of work.
We're very fortunate to have a Foley artist on staff, actually.
Oh, really?
She does a lot of other things, but Andrea Buchheit here is a Foley artist, and she's got a whole thing full of shoes, different kind of shoes with different soles and clothes, bracelets, things that make all these common sounds we take for granted.
She's also a talented mixer. Let me just mention, I think she did the majority of the mix on my movie too, I believe.
Yes, she did.
There's another movie that I worked on just a couple months ago that actually is coming out today.
Oh, cool. What's that one?
The movie Saturday Night about the
really? Oh, cool.
Saturday Night Live.
Right.
Yeah, that was a very interesting movie.
You can't tell us what you got to do on it.
I did some ADR.
Oh, did? Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Great,
yeah,
good.
With an actor that was here in town because he was working on another film here.
Oh, cool.
I have one funny story for you. Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, his executive producer at the time, produced Lincoln here, back a few years ago. We had the press conference for the movie here in Studio A, and they invited all the media from New York and LA and everything. Spielberg got sick that morning. He couldn't be here, and he sent Kathleen Kennedy instead. She came here early, and she was sitting on the sofa back here. And I was just chatting with her. We were having a cup of coffee. I said, so what's after Lincoln? And she goes, well, I don't know, but I've got a meeting next week with George Lucas about something. She goes, I have no idea what he wants. And 3 weeks later on Entertainment Tonight, which I never watched, but for some reason it was on, and they made the announcement Kathleen Kennedy had accepted the leadership of Lucasfilms. George Lucas had handed over management of Lucasfilms to Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, wow.
That's what the meeting was about. And of course, shortly after that, Disney announced that they were absorbing Lucasfilms. And that was why George wanted out.
Well, it's funny because I started thinking, what George Lucas film did he make around Lincoln? I was like, what film did he make? But obviously it wasn't a film. It was the whole studio. As you know, the last question I always like to ask, when y'all aren't working in the studios, what do you like to watch?
I like to watch documentaries. And that actually is one of my most favorite things to work on. I'm getting ready to work on a documentary next month for a guy out of Charlottesville.
Carlos?
I'm very mood oriented. Sometimes I'm in the mood to watch this. Sometimes I'm in the mood to watch that. I like every kind of genre of movie and music. And what I really like is stuff that's just weird and unexpected and not necessarily artsy, but clever and creative. It's fun to watch certain movies that go through that evolution of being remade, like Dune.
Right.
Stuff like that. I really like going through all those iterations and seeing what different directors and actors, what their take is on a role that we've seen before. But, I got to tell you, Jerry, you work in this business and you learn all the nasty tricks and you learn all the production stuff. And some things, particularly at film festivals, amateur stuff and independent stuff, I can't watch, because of some little thing, little technical, it wrecks the whole thing for me. And I've become too critical. I know you suffer probably a little of that, right?
Oh, yeah. That reminds me of something you mentioned to me when we were doing the mix on Dirt Woman. I thought it was an interesting comment, and I want to see if you remember it and talk about it. I said something about sometimes you can't understand what they're saying, and you said sometimes sound mixers intentionally make it hard to understand, to pull you in, to make you more involved. Do you remember that discussion?
Yeah. It's true. I mean, it's just like having a conversation with a person that starts talking softly. You're in a conversation with somebody and they start talking softly. Then you have to lean in.
Right.
It's human nature. You have to lean in to listen to what they're saying. Sometimes people do it and it's a bad habit. They develop that and you kind of can call them out on it. But, we'll pull the level down on something, particularly in a real intimate scene or whatever, to make people kind of get a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit more lean in and listen a little bit harder. It's all psychological. You just learn over the years what works and what doesn't work. Half the time, I don't even know why I do some of the things I do. What about you, Paul?
Same thing. Yeah. It's a feel thing,
It's a feel thing, Jerry.
Yeah, it is a feel thing. Well, guys, this has been great. I'm glad we could get this to happen at last. Paul, thank you for being on the show for the first time. Carlos, I'm sure I'll be dragging you back in again at some point.
All right.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Gary.
That was Carlos Chafin and Paul Bruski from In Your Ear Studios, Richmond's premier sound facility. I'll have a link to IYE on the webpage for the show at tvjerry.com.
Coming soon. In theaters.
Smile 2. This horror sequel revolves around a pop star whose world tour turns evil. We Live in Time. Florence Pugh accidentally hits Andrew Garfield with her car, and they develop a decades-long romance. Rumors. The leaders of the G7 democracies get lost in the woods, where they're terrified by bog bodies and a giant brain, with Cate Blanchett and Charles Dance. Goodrich. When his wife enters rehab, a man has to deal with their kids, starring Michael Keaton. Exhibiting Forgiveness. Andre Holland plays an artist whose success is derailed when his estranged father, a recovering addict, shows up.
TV and streaming.
Brothers on Prime. Peter Dinklage and Josh Brolin play brothers, who are also criminals in this comedy from the director of Palm Springs, with Ethan Coen as one of the writers. Canary Black on Prime. It follows Avery Graves as she's blackmailed by terrorists into betraying her own country to save her kidnapped husband, with Kate Beckinsale and Rupert Friend. The Devil's Hour on Prime. A thriller about a woman who wakes up every night at exactly 3:33 a.m. in the middle of the so-called Devil's Hour between 3 and 4 a.m. American Horror Stories on Hulu. This anthology series from Ryan Murphy enters a new season with Henry Winkler and Michael Imperioli. The Lincoln Lawyer drops a new season on Netflix. What We Do in the Shadows. The vampire comedy launches its final season on Hulu. Star Trek Lower Decks has its final season on Paramount+. The Virginia Film Festival runs from October 30th through November 3rd of this year. I'll have an interview next week with Charlottesville filmmaker Paul Wagner about his new documentary, Georgia O'Keeffe, The Brightness of Light. This is Jerry Williams. Thanks for listening.
For more Sister, including literally thousands of reviews,
Visit tvjerry.com.
That's a wrap.